In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. Yet blind are the eyes that only see darkness, for it is in the dark that light burns brightest. Tens of thousands of years ago, humans gathered around the fire and began to tell stories. This gave meaning to the world around them, the significance of the winter solstice, what it was to see gods in the wind and rain, creation myths that gave purpose to why we're all here, why we get up in the morning. For Aboriginal peoples here in Australia, it was, collectively, the dreaming and spiritual connections to country and mob. For Egyptians or the Aztecs, life and death was ordered. Each god had its place and responsibilities. In Northern Europe, one could see Thor in the thunder and lightning, just as Greeks paid libations to Zeus or Demeter for a bountiful harvest. More than that, it was a reason to keep going, to uphold common good, to live well, to protect one's family and loved ones, to pursue dreams and find one's place and meaning in the world. Stories created culture, and culture is everything. Art, music, light and sound, colour and texture. The ways we express stories may have changed, but the fundamental drive has not. I have long believed that the two greatest objective things to come out of human existence are storytelling and music, and I, like many people, find a meaning in stories, find purpose, find a reason to keep going. Fast forward to the modern age, however, and ask yourself this: what stories are being created today? Where does culture, generally speaking, stand? This goes to the heart of the problem, far beyond political ideology, religion, everything, into the death of meaning, sincerity, and the rise of cultural nihilism. Like everyone, I too sought an escape into stories, even from a young age. It doesn't have to be a coping mechanism per se, but it's probably fair to say that, much like some dumb kids kicking around an inflated pig splatter centuries ago, we really haven't fundamentally changed since then. Life is rote, often boring, so we dream as a form of escapism, and through these dreams we tell stories. I have a lot of problems with Joseph Campbell, and I dislike the hero's journey, or monomyth, for how it's treated as prescriptive to every story ever, how it's just a theory, a way of looking at things, but people pretend like it's this catch-all for every culture in existence. Nevertheless, it's obviously had a profound effect on understanding how storytelling developed. If we add in Jung's idea of the collective unconscious, the recurring motifs of vampires, dragons, and so forth, on opposite ends of the globe with cultures that never had any contact, it suggests the fundamental importance of stories, transcending biological needs and the need to look up, in a sense, to feel important and, again, achieve purpose and meaning in existence. Otherwise, what would we have? We'd fall into pointless, hopeless despair. Fundamentally, much of human existence comes back to stories. What does that say about our culture, then, as a species, to see where these stories are at today? Not in a good place, and that's telling for where we're heading as a culture and as a species. That the archetypal hero, a beacon of hope, was never someone to look up to. He's just a tired, bitter old man, dead inside long before the final blow was struck. A nepotistic trust fund baby who's never had a hard day in her life, spearheading a girl boss vanity project made by Harvey Weinstein's personal assistant, who would have knowingly sent countless women up to his room. Oh, but it's okay, I guess, because she's a lesbian. Some of the most celebrated creatives across industries heralding serial rapists as God, or pedophiles who the same industry has spent decades defending since. That a cartel leader who executed entire families, inflicted untold misery, and made their fortune off suffering is suddenly forgiven because they're trans now. A film somehow nominated for the same amount of awards as Gone with the Wind and The Lord of the Rings. That millions of taxpayer dollars are being spent on performative, surface-level, preachy propaganda that is designed for no one. That nothing ever mattered, your choices were meaningless, and it's time to sit in on a group therapy session written by developers' personal OCs. That heroes responsible for saving countless lives, giving everything they can and fighting the good fight where others can't, are instead just tired old men, shot on a park bench. That artists, musicians, celebrities talk about how they want to end world hunger, they want global peace, a fair go for all, when they're really just parasitic performative losers. that archetypal femininity is something to be eradicated, not embraced or celebrated, and that ironically enough, the modern woman is completely masculine, or orcs are, in fact, just poor and misunderstood now, that key historical figures are suddenly black because this lady's grandmother said so, that committing crime is glorified and cool when it's done by the right side of history, that Disney's Girl Boss remake was shot near concentration camps in Xinjiang province, where the worst genocide since World War II has been happening to the Uyghur minority, but no one talks about it because of China's economic power. Book burnings under the Third Reich and many other fascist states were done because regimes demand conformity. Literature, art, music, these things are inherently expressive and propose ideas that fascism cannot tolerate. It must be destroyed, and people must be taught to conform and submit. What is happening today is really not that dissimilar. Art is being destroyed, stories are being torn down and subject to the plague of revisionism, and with nowhere else to turn to find meaning, the ill effects have begun to manifest themselves in societies across the world. There has always been trash. There has always been propaganda, edge, but what I'm trying to get at is a kind of moral or spiritual sickness as a result of what's been happening to culture and storytelling. With the collapse of meaning and the vessels for how people find hope and understanding in existence, it feels like more and more people are falling into despair. There is, increasingly, less solace to be found in stories, and that is a serious problem. Just as sociologists once theorized that violent crime was the result of societal failings, the prevailing cynicism, self-deprecation, loneliness, and despair that is increasingly prevalent across the world is representative of a lack of meaning. We cannot escape anymore. We cannot look away because there is nothing else. Nothing else to find solace or hope in, conform or suffer the consequences, follow the party line, regurgitate what you see on social media or from performative hacks and video essays, think tank editorials and consultancy groups. There are fewer and fewer worthwhile stories being told. There are less characters that are well-rounded, flawed, emotionally mature, instead of quirky OCs or self-aware hatchet jobs covering bad writing through irony. Everything must be intersectional by design. It's not enough to simply write a children's story about right or wrong. It must also be examined through the lens of class, gender, and social constructivism. Whether you or I think these changes are good or bad is irrelevant. Just because something being torn down may suit your worldview, surely you must realize that society has done nothing to put something meaningful in its place. That's the problem. Subversion is all good and well in theory, but we have reached the point where to be truly subversive, you would have to tell a story that is emotionally sincere, a work that wears its heart on its sleeve, not more metatextual, wink at the camera trash. You can tear down and destroy as much as you want, but what are you going to put in its place? What could you yourself possibly have to say? Look up now, and the sky is getting darker. We may have to dig deeper, but there are still stories being made that mean something. And now, more than ever, it is so important to hold on to hope. In addition to being so poorly written, insincere, preachy shit in general, one of the things that much of modern writing fails to understand is the importance of contrast. Some snarky jokes are okay, but you can't have smart-ass comments all the time. Can't be all happy-go-lucky all the time because there's no conflict. It can't be bleak and depressing all the time either because there is no light. Even in the darkest of times, common good still remains. Hope still remains. Hold on to it, because it matters. I'm pretty new when it comes to Warhammer 40k. My first real introduction, if you like, was Darktide back in 2022. I'd seen the Astartes animation way back in the day, but I had no idea what was happening, other than that it looked cool, I guess. I remember there was a Games Workshop in the shopping centre near where I grew up. I used to go in there sometimes and just look at the models, because it was, cool. Still, I don't actually own a single model. I'm terrible at arts and craft, and I don't know how many people can afford the hobby with how stingy GW is, at least without selling a kidney or something on the side. Yet it was starting to read through the lore, books like the Sisters of Battle Omnibus, and playing Rogue Trader or Space Marine 2 last year, that things finally clicked. Warhammer 40k is awesome. There's nothing else like it. Even though the series literally coined the term grimdark, a huge part of the appeal to me is these legendary moments of heroism. The universe of 40k is a meat grinder. Billions upon billions of people being thrown into the fire as eldritch horrors feed off the conflict, but still, they keep going. Moments like Rylanor telling Fulgrim he's a little bitch and then detonating the bomb. Malkador giving everything, even himself, for the Imperium. Sanguinius fighting Horus and making his final stand in the Imperial Palace. The fact there are orcs fighting eternally in the warp because Khorne thinks it's funny. Or how they grew to respect Yarrick. Alicia Dominica as she struck down the despot Goj Vandire. Dante or Bjorn that struggle on even well past their time. Or, best of all, the myth, the man, the legend himself, the sheer fucking balls on Ursarkar E. Creed, who carried the entirety of Cadia's defenses and the very fate of the Imperium on his back. The planet broke before the Guard did. One of my favourite aspects is in the Sisters of Battle. Big shocker, I know. Thematically, I find them so interesting, beyond just how cool the whole nuns with guns thing is, and there isn't a single character that embodies this more, holding on to hope and faith, even in the darkest hour, than the living saint herself, Celestine. If you don't know the lore, every time she essentially revives or reincarnates, she climbs over a mountain of her own bodies to get her armor and weapons back. The symbolism here isn't subtle, of course, nothing in 40k really is, but that's besides the point. The moment she gives up, it's very likely the Emperor won't be able to bring her back, but she doesn't. That's what's so beautiful. I'm not religious. I never have been. I don't really want to get into it here because it's not important and everyone has their own strong feelings on it, but I just can't conceive of a god. Even spirituality, as much as I've tried to, and would like to think that nature has power. Part of that is probably why I find the Adeptus Sororitas so fascinating, that their fanaticism and unwavering faith against impossible odds and the absolute worst the warp and an uncaring universe can throw at them is why the Imperium is still standing. I think it's interesting to look at the God Emperor and the Golden Throne through this lens, because there's an implication that he could become a literal god of faith within the warp. The Imperium revolves around faith, an unwavering loyalty to Terra, and a man that has sat upon the throne for 10,000 years. We have Khorne for bloodlust and violence, Tzeentch for trickery and deceit, Slaanesh for gluttony and desire, and Nurgle for sickness or decay. The psychic energy that's been pouring into the Emperor for thousands of years, you'd think would be enough to rewrite the laws of the universe, should he one day move from the throne. But I digress. We should probably address the elephant in the room because this just has to happen every time 40k is brought up. I'm sure someone right now has the most brain-dead take imaginable that I've fallen victim to fascist imagery and that I'm encouraging societal harm by romanticizing the Imperium, Sisters of Battle, etc. 40k is not fascist, and it never has been. You have no idea what you're talking about if you think the Imperium of Man, or really anything in 40k, is fascist, because to be fascist, one would require consistency. 40k is still absolutely satire, but to claim it's fascist or even encouraging fascism is ridiculous, and more a reflection on how poor your media literacy is. 40k is a hodgepodge of bureaucratic, autocratic, theocratic, aristocratic, and pretty much every other social and political system imaginable, and it's why the setting is so obviously played up for satirical purposes. The fact that the Imperium is still standing when it's perpetually on the verge of collapsing under its own weight is part of the world building. That still doesn't make it fascist. It might use fascist imagery, it might be overly militaristic, sure, but it kind of needs to be. Is it really a fascist state obsessed with waging war when you take a look out the window and see that everything and everyone in the galaxy is going for your throat? It's absolutely corrupt, ineffective, and constantly fighting itself more than anything else. But the idiots trying to paint 40k as a whole as fascist or glorifying fascism can fuck off. Anyway, I didn't want to get too far into this. Warhammer 40k is really the best example of what I was talking about when it comes to hope, what it means to look up. Even in the age of nihilistic or pessimistic despair, there are still moments of courage, beauty, and heroism that encourage people to believe in something greater than themselves. This is what's so important now more than ever, as the media and stories so many people once put their faith in are being torn down and spat on by ideologues to use them as mouthpieces or revisionist propaganda. Don't get me wrong, I've spoken a great deal about how unhealthy it can be to form parasocial attachments to media or particular creatives. This is not a call to overcorrect. You shouldn't swing too far in the other direction either. But at this point, honestly, gatekeeping is good, for without stories, a huge part of the collective human existence loses meaning. And without meaning, we don't have hope. You can tear down as much as you want, but ask yourself this: what are you going to put or create in its place? If there's any takeaway from this video, it's this: nihilism is easy. I went through a very low point in my life where I thought that was the solution, that there was no hope, that nothing ultimately matters. As someone who has been through that and come out the other end though, that's not true. What you do, what you create, the stories you tell, it absolutely matters. To point at the sky and say one day, billions of years from now, the sun is going to explode, so what's the point, is reductive and defeatist, because you're failing to see what you can do in the here and now. Tell stories, take risks, create art, and give yourself and those around you the meaning and courage to keep going. Life is so beautiful. Hold on to it for as long as you can, because we need hope, now more than ever.
You're looking at her all in the sky thing. Well, once there was only dark. Let me ask, any lights winning?